Hey there, everybody. Continuing on with our passage from the second book of Livy in Wheelock's Latin Reader. This is on page 159, starting at line 221. So Lafleur gives us a little italicized portion between these, but these are actually continuous parts in Livy's text. So what we had just finished about the approbant patres, with the fathers approving of his plan, this is where we're starting off next. So what is Mucius up to? So abdito intra vestem ferro proficiscitur. So this is our main verb, and if we were to look this up in the dictionary, well, before we do that, we'd say, okay, ends in itur. This is going to be third person, singular. It's probably going to be passive. That's what those endings and tour look like a lot. So that we go look it up in the back of the book, and we see proficiscor, proficisci. And then it continues on, but we know from this that's a deponent verb. And what does deponent mean? Because most verbs end like amo, amare. We've got these active endings. These have a passive ending in the dictionary ending, dictionary entry. That tells us they're deponent, which means they look passive, but have an active meaning. And proficiscor means to set out. So proficiscitur means he set out. So I just wrote up there earlier, it's passive, but it's really active and it's deponent. That's why it looks the way it does. So then what's our subject here? Well, I've kind of given it away by talking, but it's third person singular, and we have nothing that's nominative in this preceding four words. So we got to go back to context and know that our subject's actually Gaius Mucius Scoivola. So he's going to be our subject, this is going to be our main verb, and then we're getting this kind of thing that's here, abdito through ferro. Well, if you look up the dictionary entries, you'll see that this is ferrum, ferri. So that is a what? Noun. That's a second declension noun. And this is a sword. Literally, it's iron, which is why if you look up iron in the periodic table, you'll see Fe from ferrum. But this is sword that we're talking about here, and with this sword having been hidden intra vestem. So we get all these kind of adverbials together. So he sets out. How does he set out? With his sword hidden. Where is it hidden? How's it hidden? Oh, it's hidden in his vest. So this prepositional phrase modifies, tells us more information about the hidden, and this whole with the thing hidden gives us a little bit of context from proficiscitur, but this is ultimately an ablative absolute. One could just say, he set out. But this is giving us a little bit more information about how Gaius Mucius, our subject, set out. So, ubi eo venet. What does ubi mean? Well, it can mean when, and it can mean where. So we don't know yet. So when or where, eo, venet. Maybe venet. Because if it's venet with a short e, then that's coming from venio, venire. This is our fourth conjugation verbs. These are the ones that have a lot of I in them, but they're not third I stem. But venire, and then everyone knows who's ever thought about Caesar, veni, vidi, vici, I came, I saw, I conquered. Veni here with a long E. These have been short. And then also you get finally ventum, to have come. So we don't know if this is long or short. It's either third person present, he arrives, or perfect, arrived. So I'm actually going to prefer here the perfect reading. And of course we're already dealing with a historical present, because this is he sets out, literally, but we're talking about past events. It's a historical present. So it really means he set out, because we're telling a story about the ancient history. Even for Livy, this was ancient. This was, almost 500 years ago. It's like talking about Shakespeare in the present tense. We don't do that in English, but Latin did. So then where or when he came, and then eo. And what we need to supply here, what's gapped, is loco. That location, that is the enemy camp. That's what we were just talking about in the last section. So when is going to work better, because where, well, we know. And of course you could say al, come on, eo, we've already seen this sort of thing with tempore, so we could say at that time. So where he came at that time, well, maybe that would work too. This is frustrating. All we know is that this is an adverbial thing that's going to tell us more about the context of our main verb that's going to come later. It's going to be constituted. and we know that he's arriving at the camp. So when he arrived there, where he arrived at that point, however we want to do it. So it's either gapped loco or tempore. I prefer when he came there, because I think that makes more sense AO. But whatever. We're moving on at this point. While it may be ambiguous grammatically, it's very clear in its meaning, and either way basically means the same thing, right? So that's good. In confertissima turba, in the most densely packed crowd, one of these superlatives, but this isn't really being accurate. We're not saying there are all these crowds in the world and this is the most densely packed of them all. This is just kind of what we might call hyperbole. This is being very exaggerated in a very densely packed crowd. That's really what this means. Very densely. Very dense. So in a very dense crowd. So I've just been translating that, assuming that you're following me and saying that this is a prepositional phrase. That all depends upon you knowing turba, turbai, feminine, as a first declension noun meaning crowd. It can't be nominative because it's following this prepositional phrase, so these have to be long. One could think that these could be accusative and neuter plurals, but then that doesn't work for turba. So by process of elimination, it can only be in a very densely packed crowd. So we know that based on grammar, not any kind of context. Just knowing the word's definition, its dictionary entry, and grammatical rules that a preposition like in needs an either ablative or accusative object, we're good to go. So next we have prope regium tribunal. So prope, as Lafleur notes, can be either an adverb or a preposition. As I mentioned in class the other day, all prepositions were originally kind of adverbs. They just got put with special cases ultimately and kind of codified into what we know as an adverb. But prope takes the accusative, which we have here, because tribunal is one of these al ending third declension neuters. So it's third declension neuter, which explains everything. This totally works as an accusative because this is working with that, but that's accusative because it's equal to the nominative. If you were to look this up in the dictionary, you'd say tribunal, tribunalis, so you'd be great. So near the royal tribunal constitit. Well, what's the subject of that? Well, again, we don't have anything, so it's got to be, again, subject equals Mucius, Gaius Mucius. So he stood firm. Why stand firm? Well, you're in a densely packed crowd of enemies. This is a bold move. So once he got there, or when he got there, or where he got then, Gaius Mucius stood firm in the most dense crowd right near the royal tribunal. So what's a tribunal? We think of war crimes tribunals as kind of maybe a raised platform with people sitting at things, kind of a meeting. Well, this is just a raised platform where the royals would be. You've set up camp. You need to establish where the king is. He's going to be off the ground. He's going to have a nice air mattress sort of thing. That's what's going on here. So the crowd's right around this. Well, why is there a crowd? Well, we'll find out a little bit more there. So maybe that works also now knowing ubi, where or when he came there, at that place, cum stipendium, so since, when, we don't know what this is going to be, but cum only takes the ablative as a prepositional phrase. So this isn't stipendio, this is stipendium. So we know we're actually going to get a cum clause here, not just a prepositional phrase using cum as a preposition. So there, when or since, whatever, the stipend, that is the payment, that's the salary, to the, I'm missing an I here, militibus. Forte, and we've seen this before, literally an ablative, but used adverbially, meaning by chance. It happened. So there, since it happened, since maybe, by chance, a stipendium daretur. So what's this? Well, we got do, dare, which is to give. And then to take that infinitive and put on a tour ending tells us this is imperfect, subjunctive, and that tour ending tells us it's passive. We're used to that for the passive third person, singular. So there, since by chance the stipend was being given out to the soldiers, so why do we have a subjunctive here? Because we're part of a come clause. So this is a since kind of meaning. Or just kind of giving us the circumstances. What's going on around this? So there, since it happened to be the case that a stipend was given out to the soldiers, and there was a scriba, so this is like nauta or agricola, a feminine first declension, well, something that looks like a feminine first declension, but is actually masculine. So first declension, but masculine. So this is a scribe, this is a secretary. With the king, so here we just had a come as a come clause, but here we have it as a preposition because we know that this is an ablative, and this is exactly where you use the ablative with come, accompaniment. So accompanying the scribe, and the scribe was sitting with the king, pari, and as we mentioned in the last little lecture, we had parisyllabic, which was equal with respect to syllables. Here we have equal, but we don't know how, in what way equal yet. So equal, fere, almost. This is almost like paine. So nearly equal or not to. And that's actually what pari is going with. So with ornamentation, nearly equal. So what does that mean? You're like, great, Al, this is very useful. We can at least mark this off. And this is going to be another ablative use. This is an ablative of description. We can do this sometimes in Latin where we just use an ablative to describe what a person looks like, etc. I think back to that Mad TV. Well, what did he look like? He looked like a man. You know, there's this woman who could just not give any meaningful description of what a person is. Well, if she could give a meaningful description, she would use the Latin. I know that Mad TV reference is now like 10 years old and probably none of you got it, but that's fine. The point is we use ablatives to describe people. So this is a scriba, a royal secretary, sitting with the king and with nearly equal ornamentation. So he's dressed just about as nicely as the king. And what's he doing? Well, he's doing many things. Literally, ago, doing many things. So this is our subject. This is our verb. And then this is the direct object of that verb. So why do we have an imperfect subjunctive here? Well, that's a good question. We'll get to that. So eumque, and he, or him, because this is going to be what? Accusative. Milites. So this is what we just had here, a nice third declension noun. Here it's going to be a long es. This could be nominative, it could be accusative, we don't know. So we do have this accusative, but remember this que is actually connecting here. It's not connecting him and soldiers, it's connecting phrases, kind of working like that at. So, and him, soldiers, vulgo, and this just means openly, in public. Adirent. So we've seen this verb already. Ire, to go, adire. This is the approach verb we saw with Gaius Mucius approached the Senate earlier. Here we've got milites, and now that we know that this is a third person plural, this is going to be our subject, this is going to be our verb, this is going to be our direct object, and again, we just use the accusative because we have the preposition built into the verb, ad ire, approach. So we have a scribe sitting next to the king in a nearly equal ornamentation to the king, doing many things, and the soldiers were openly coming to him, where again we're talking about the scriba here. So good, that's what we have going on. So all of this has secretly been part of this come clause. So I closed it off here, right? But that was actually wrong. Let me do some close, I don't know, syntactical surgery here. And so we have, and let's give us these senses, these circumstances that are going around. There, once Gaius Mucius arrived, lots of things were going on. Part 1, it happened to be the day that the military stipend, or the stipend was going out to the soldiers. That's part 1. And part 2, a scribe, a secretary, sitting next to the king, dressed nearly in equal ornament, was doing many things. That's our part 2 verb. So we've got verb 1. All this is subject to the, or all of this is part of the come clause. That's why it's all in an imperfect subjunctive, doing many things. And part 3, many soldiers openly were coming to this guy. So this is our come clause verb number 3. There we go. That's finally the end of our long tripartite come clause. Good. Now, T-mains, so we're back just like we had metuanes earlier, fearing, so we're getting a sense of who Gaius Mucius is. He's a guy that is fearful and yet will do these incredibly brave actions. But he's not stupid, he's not reckless. Well, he's somewhat reckless, we'll see. But he is fearful. I think that kind of raises the emotional stakes, the ethical stakes of what kind of a man this guy is. So, fearing scistari. Well, we have this, fortunately, glossed on page 160. And I also have totally cut it short. So it should be scitari. That's why I wasn't recognizing it. So this is that's a classic scribal error to make for me to drop one of these SCs. But this is what we want. So fearing, and what does scitari mean? To inquire. So again, this is a passive kind of infinitive, but it's deponent. That's just how it's working here. So fearing to inquire, uter, and this opens up a kind of relative clause, but what did uter mean? It means which of the two. So it's nice here because we do have two people. We've got the king and we've got the scribe. Oh man, I was typing terribly here. There should be an E there. So which of the two Porsenna esset was? Again, nice imperfect subjunctive here. So I'm saying was because this is all going on in the past tense, but this is just an imperfect subjunctive because he's fearing something. Fearing to ask which of these was. Sorry, it's not going with the fear clause, it's going with this question. Because he wants to ask it, he's like, which one might you be? That's why we get the subjunctive here. And then here, nay. Finally, we get another clause of fearing. I'll just write fearing first, then clause of. All of this being triggered by this verb of fearing, T-mains. So again, this is fearing lest, to be Victorian about it, but it means that you want something not to happen. That's what fearing is, the thing that you don't hope to happen. So really it's fearing that, we might say, ignorando. By being ignorant, and this isn't just being ignorant, because he is ignorant, but by being openly ignorant, we might say, the king. So ignorando, let me pause here to say, not knowing, and then this is going to take a direct object. So this is what that ND should be helping you out. It's a gerund. And it's not gerundive because it's not modifying regum, otherwise it would be in the same case. This is just a verbal noun by not knowing the king. So this is the gerund's direct object, the regum, and this is a gerund. So all of this gerundive phrase is kind of adverbial. So he's afraid that by asking which one Porsenna is, or he's afraid to ask which one Porsenna is, because fearing that by not knowing the king, say met, and then this met is just a kind of bogus thing. It's a way of intensifying what we're talking about with the say, but this is just third person singular reflexive, so it's talking about the subject of the sentence, aka Gaius Mucius. So by himself seeming not sorry, let me start over. So he's fearing to ask which one is Porsenna in order that he not, by being ignorant of the king, he himself aperiret, expose who he was. So we get this nice kind of parallelism, right, between this. I don't know which one Porsenna is, but I, by being ignorant, will make clear what kind of person I am, aka the kind of person who doesn't know that Porsenna is king, because I'm not actually Etruscan, I'm Roman. So this say is basically acting as our subject. We'll sometimes say se ipsa, together, so that he himself, by the process of not knowing the king, would make clear who he is. And then quo, if you look this up, is to whither, or just whither, which equals to where. We don't use whither anymore. We've lost some of these kind of inflected adverbs in English, but it means to where. So what we have, to what point, is I guess what we're kind of going on here. Temere, well, this kind of looks like temere, to fear, but this just means rashly. It's an adverb. So rashly, traxit fortuna facinus. So fortuna, we don't know if it's ablative or nominative. In this case, it actually is nominative. It's going to be our subject, and it's the subject of the verb traxit, and then facinus is the direct object. So this is all fairly abstract. To that point, to where fortune, that is chance, kind of directs rashly the deed. Or we might also, I think we could be open to, this is by chance, where by chance he did directed the deed. So we still don't know what the deed is. All this facinus, this great action, we don't know what it's going to be, but at this point we've got enough context to where we can guess. So he's worried about asking about Porsenna, because he knows that if he shows that he's ignorant of who the king is, he'll be killed. So instead of asking, fortune either directs the action boldly, or he, by chance, directs the action boldly. I prefer fortuna as the subject here, because I think the rashly doesn't make sense otherwise, or at least not quite as well. So what does he do? Scribam pro rege. So we've seen this pro tempora, for a time. This is instead of. Instead of the king. He obtruncats. What does that mean? Well, this is a present, historical present, and it means to cut down, to kill. So the moment's come, they're going to ask him, tickets please, show us that you're here for your money, and he's not going to be able to do that. He needs to kill one of them, so he's going to kill the one who's doing stuff. He's going to make the assumption that that's the king. Who's this other useless guy next to him? So, big mistake, but he doesn't know that yet. But we'll see what the fallout is from this in our next little entry. See you then.